Our next point features a very special commentary from my old pal Billy Corgan of the Smashing Pumpkins. Take a look.
No, I believe the album is dead, absolutely, which sounds counterintuitive to the message. We still think it's an effective form of communication. In our case, it's helping change the perception of the band's artistic legacy. No, there's no way the album's ever going to reclaim its place in the culture. Look at where we are right now with technology. Imagine where it's going to be in 5 years. I mean, you're getting to the point where you can Skype with somebody on your phone. I mean, can you imagine? We're going to have such a different set of relationships with one another. The idea that we're going to sit somewhere for 60 minutes and listen to a record is like, forget about it. Now maybe we'll do it if it has a visual component, but that's very hard to manifest, you know, resource-wise. And even then, I don't know, if you had a 60-minute album with video, would you watch it all the way through more than once? I really doubt it. I'm an artist who obviously hasn't been squarely focused on selling records, so I would have kept the same music. I would have been a little easier to get along with. But that being said, rock and roll needs to be effective, and when it stops being effective, an artist like ourselves needs to figure out new ways to break down the barriers.
Douglas, I want to go to you on this. You're the music guy here, and I was in a past life. Is Billy right? Is the album really dead, or is it just seen that way and it's waiting for another artist to redefine the form?
Let me just point out that I am so impressed that Mr. Corgan was so polite in that video. He's rarely that nice to people.
Every time I ever met him when I was a VJ for all those years at VH1, he was always a real prince, really sweet guy.
Was he?
Every time.
I've seen him at concerts where the crowd has flicked him off. They have paid hard-earned money to see him, and he gave them the bird, and they gave him the bird.
Wow.
He's a smart guy, and he's super talented.
I never saw that, but every time I met the guy, he was a gent.
Well, there you go.
So, but here's the
Yes,
thing:
to his point,
is he right that the album is dead?
He is absolutely right. You know, if you think otherwise, you can go have fun with your Walkman and your 8-track. It is absolutely dead. It's a
think
product.
otherwise. I'm going to challenge you, but go ahead.
He had a point about making art pieces out of it, and I completely respect that. And people will continue to do that. And occasionally, things will pop up where it really means, you know, the wall. The wall might happen again. Something like that might happen again. But
yeah,
in a way, this actually empowers artists. They're not focused on creating a 60-minute, like he said, you know, piece of work that's meant to be cohesive and coherent. I mean, we should backtrack to understand why the album exists in the first place. You know the reason why the album exists.
When it was a LP for long play?
Yeah, long play. The reason why it exists is because it gave the record labels an opportunity to sell something more expensive to the consumer. I mean, the artists back in the days, and for example in the 50s and early 60s, were selling singles. You know, 45s. My parents bought them. And then I remember I had my mother's first copy of the Beatles LP. It was a compilation of their singles called "Meet the Beatles."
Yeah.
And that was when the industry said, "Oh my God, we can charge these kids that much more for vinyl plastic," and so that's how that was born.
But that was cobbled together.
That's cobbled together.
That's before Sgt. Pepper and the album as a concept as
sure,
as an
but
art
Commerce,
form.
in a weird way, created that piece of art, rather than the other way around.
Absolutely, but I think I agree with Tom York of Radiohead. You know, even when he said the CD will never die, because people will always want to have something they could hold in their hand. You know, not just old rock and roll fans.
Right, we can get into a conversation about the book
people,
versus Kindle.
let's define who those people might be.
Well, look, there's people making a living off of vinyl now, okay? Like, vinyl was dead. It's like in cinema. They said the Western was dead for years. The musical was dead for years. And when someone can say no, and it's like in comedy, oh, airport material. No, you get a new spin on it. You do something new with it. You know, they said the Western was dead. Clint Eastwood won Best Picture for Unforgiven. The musical's dead. Chicago wins Best Picture. We hear this all the time.
That's a little different. You're talking about genres rather than...
I am talking about genres, sure, but I do think that when an artist has some, and let's be honest, the album as an art form was anemic for a long time. We've gone a couple of decades with albums that have 2 singles and 8 tracks of filler.
Yeah.
So are we really moving back to the 50s where it's going to be a single-based culture and your artistic statement as a musician is going to be, what can I pack into 3 minutes?
I think I don't necessarily think so, but I think to a certain degree it is, right? I go on iTunes. The reality is I don't usually buy the album. I buy the single or like 2 songs that I like. Maybe that means I'm violating my loyalty to the band. Sorry, Billy Corgan, but
not at all.
but you know, I mean, at the end of the day, like I pick the songs I like. I mean, we're a choice society, right? That's where we're going.
That's what the market demands.
Yeah.
And you're in good company. I mean, the future of America and the world, the future consumers of the world, that is the only way they understand how to buy music or
John, you are not the future. I hate to
well, no.
listen,
I do think we're moving back to a single culture. I do think, though, you will see artists trying to make a statement. You'll see people like Springsteen. You'll see people like McCartney who will have concept albums. Radiohead's still going to make great albums.
Jack White does.
Jack White's still going to make great albums as well. I mean, but I'm glad you mentioned Jack White, because
Third Main Records. I mean, here's the thing: you're going to have like an artisanal culture that likes the handcrafted sort of small batch, like things that you apply to maybe like craft beer, cocktails. Everything's cyclical. You have this huge craft cocktail culture. Maybe you thought the mule was dead. It's back. People drink it.
Moscow,
right.
also known as Moscow Mule.
And I do agree with you. I do agree with Douglas in theory that the album's dead, but I do think we will see people still come out and release great albums. But I'm glad you mentioned Jack White, because in the era of downloadable music, we were talking about this earlier, Jack White is now a member of 312 different bands. I don't know if you know that, but he's touring. He's in 312 different bands.
Wait, now 314.
Okay, right, sorry. And the reality, Wanda Jackson has a new album.
He's just traveling.
Well, here's the
Is he
reality.
like the James Franco of the music industry?
Well, a bit more consistent. But here's the reality of the industry now. We're looking at artists who aren't making money off of albums anymore, and it's getting harder for them to make money off of singles anymore now that they're so easily stolen. So artists, for better or worse, have to go back and make their money on the road.
They say that's where all the
again,
money
we're
is.
back to the 50s again with this too.
Sure.
So that's why you'll see people like Jack White belonging to 3 or 4 different bands. You'll see, Dave Grohl starts up them Crooked Vultures. We'll see more of these hybrid super bands because artists have to keep touring more and they can't bring out the same combo all the time.
They do, but all the artists you've mentioned so far, Springsteen, McCartney, and so on, these are all legacy artists.
Sure.
Jack White, it was also built by the industry pre-Napster.
He sure was.
He's fortunate, but he's obsessed with old culture and the blues and all of that. So he's just going to be a part of that because he wants to be a part of that. And all of those artists are incredible, but that's the world they know. And if we're talking about the artists of today and the future, these are the people who don't have the advantage of having a major label build them up and turn them into superstars. Radiohead, prime example, In Rainbows. They waited until their record deal was over and they put out the most palatable record they'd put out in years to give the finger to the man because they could. No one else could do that at the time. No one else could play their album for free. Trent Reznor got screwed when he tried to follow in their footsteps, and he's a huge artist.
It's really true. You could say that Radiohead followed up their most uncommercial album with Hail to the Thief with this most gorgeous thing they'd done in ages, and it was all part of their plan. And
they could only do that because they're legacy artists from basically 2000.
Yeah.
That's the only reason. That's the same. That's the case with all those other artists you mentioned. But with artists that are now coming up, how are they supposed to build their brand? How are they supposed to make a living? I mean, go into a studio and record an album isn't necessarily the best way for them to do that these days.
I agree.
Yeah, but I think it's not necessarily, but I think the next generation, we're kind of like the young folks, even there are folks who are even younger than us. But it's through social media now, right? Like you put a video up on YouTube and you make money. Hello, we have Justin Bieber because of it. I think you're just going to find new ways. And quite frankly, I don't think the mega artist is necessarily dead either.
And in some ways, the younger artists are now the new young dinosaurs because Lady Gaga has so much pressure on her to have massive album sales to keep this industry limping along.
Yeah.
Now, one of my favorite scenes in a movie is from Hard Day's Night. They felt that George didn't have enough to do in the movie, so they wrote a special scene for George that I think is the greatest scene in the film, where they have George accidentally wander into this room where this foppish middle-aged man is deciding what all the 16-year-olds are going to love in 6 months. Right. He has no idea who this young guy is and just begins quizzing him, and George just hates all the music and hates all the pop stars and these invented plastic people he's pointing out. And he winds up being fascinated at George, and it was really uncommonly political. And it really showed how, what I experienced years later in the MTV generation of a bunch of guys in corner offices trying to figure out what terrifying Negro rapper will horrify parents to sell a lot of records and get the kids to buy our acne medication we advertise. I think it's great to rejoice at the thought of record company scumbags biting the dust. But is it premature? While the art is going to find new ways to get out there and be available to the masses, what does it mean to the record industry? And is the collapse of the record industry a good thing?
I think it might be. We're an economy of creative destruction, and I think that people holding on.
Very dramatic of you.
Yeah.
Economy of creative destruction.
Very
That's the Nine Inch Nails album, actually.
The man is coming after all of
Let's just
it.
blow up all the labels.
Well, here's the thing: is that when the printing press came out, it put an end to scribes handwriting everything.
Yes.
So
Gutenberg really screwed over the quill pen industry.
Monks.
The democratization of music publication, going into the digital form, is a positive thing. I mean, if
Is
you
it democratization, or are they going to find a whole new way to rip
Well,
us off?
No, there's gonna find a whole new way to rip us off.
No, but here's what I'm saying. Like, all the money that's in music, like, people will always want music. Music will always be there. Someone will have to pay for it because people have to have money to survive to produce it, right? What's happening now is 10 to 20% of an album's sales goes to the artist.
Yeah.
10 to 20%.
really
So it's the recording industry, the legacy record labels that are the ones that are losing the money.
Is she right about that?
No, I mean, she's absolutely right that they're making the lion's share of the money, and they've screwed over artists for a long time because they became greedy, and that's a big reason why they are in trouble right now, is they've denied technology and they denied change, but they're absolutely necessary for the future, not necessarily in the current incarnation, maybe not Sony and EMI and Warner Brothers, it might be smaller, different, but they absolutely are necessary. Distribution, marketing, and so on are things that a bedroom artist can't pull off just on YouTube and social media.
The entire industry is not going. I mean, human nature. Get it, guys? Human nature.
Oh, yeah.
Come on, I've been dying to throw that one out there.
You're the funny one on the
Come
panel. I forgot.
No, but it is. I mean, human nature is we're going to want what kind of the other person has, and I don't think that the record industry or the mega companies are dying or anytime soon. I think they are going to have to change, and I think technology has proven that if they don't change, they will maybe meet their maker.
Then let me shift gears really quickly. And by the way, Human Nature is a band too bush for me. This year, Bruce Springsteen put out arguably his most political album ever, and I would say
they say that every year, John.
Well, no, this one was real. I mean, Magic was pretty political, but this one's a really This one's a real political record.
I went to
also
the
think it's
concert, and it was very political.
I love the new band, and I think it's arguably his best album in many years. It's fantastic. Everybody who cares about politics or good music should pick up Wrecking Ball. But when we talk about artists who are political, when we talk about Dixie Chicks or Springsteen or even Lady Gaga or Tom Morello, of course.
Kanye.
Or Kanye, well, Kanye half the time. Kanye half the time. He's sort of the Ron Paul of hip hop. But here's the thing: when these artists make these political statements, we can admire them. I trust artists on politics, going back to The Fool and King Lear. Do they have any real impact on the debate?
Are you kidding me? I'm
not. I'm serious.
Politics show here at the Young Turks, and the concept is predicated on the fact that yes, the answer is yes to that. They absolutely
do. They preach to their own choir, or do they have any real impact?
They do absolutely have an impact. Unfortunately, I think today, the big emphasis for young, when it comes to music is to get people just to vote, rather than to give them an agenda. And one of the reasons why 60s music was so important and was so moving is because it had an agenda. There is no there's no media that is hotter than music. There's not one thing I can think of that you want to listen to over and over or consume and perceive over and over and over again that, other than like music. The only thing I can think of.
FDA regulations.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Yeah, well, I mean, that's true. There are some things you might want to snort and eat. Yeah, exactly. But the only thing I can think of that's a distant second is the sense of, the sense of smell. Reminds you of something. Like a song reminds you of the first kiss you had, or
your sense memory. You're talking about.
Yeah, exactly. But unfortunately, right now the emphasis is on technology. How can we share the concert we're at? How can we talk about the music that we're listening to rather than like just enjoying it?
Yeah. Well,
and my point is, sorry, I went off. I'm coming back.
I like
going around the corner, going around the block to get across the street.
Come on back.
Is that those artists are absolutely important, and there needs to be more of a refocus on what is their message. And a lot of artists have a message, like you said. It's not just old fogies like the Boss. It's a lot of young artists, and and the message needs to be, rather than like how much money am I making, it needs to, because no one's making money, and especially the new artists, it needs to be about like what they believe in, what do they care about.
Okay, but
and we need to celebrate them.
I'm not going to deny that Lady Gaga's caused there to be less homophobia in America. Okay, there's a lot of kids who stopped hating their gay classmates because they listened to Gaga. Crosby, Stills, and Nash, they may have helped end the Vietnam War. Dylan's early stuff when he wasn't afraid to be political turned a lot of people on. Paul McCartney got banned on the BBC for writing a song with Wings called "Give Ireland Back to the Irish." But at some level, the argument always levied against them is, well, shut up and sing, which you don't hear them telling NASCAR drivers or athletes to shut up, or country stars to shut up about their politics. But are they just preaching to the converted? They'll make their fans happy with echoing their own political statements and articulating it in a new way. But has anyone ever changed their vote based on something a rock star said?
I don't think, though, that that's necessarily the outcome that needs to be had. I mean, generating a debate about it, I think, is good enough of an outcome.
Yeah.
Even if you're not swaying anybody, just having it in the public sphere, because people aren't talking about politics as much as they should be. Which is why Occupy was so great, was because it thrust it into, like, right in front of people and, like, forced them to talk about it. And the same thing with the Tea Party movement as well. And we've got to reinvigorate public discourse about politics.
Yeah, I agree.
I
So-
agree. No, that's absolutely the case. I think that's what musicians provide, is that they provide context, and they provide that they can be a mirror or a window into what's happening.
That's the artist's responsibility.
It gets you involved in that way. You know, Kanye West was a perfect example, going down to Occupy Wall Street, gold chains, gold teeth, and he didn't talk. And Russell Simmons had to speak for him. None of that was appropriate on some level, but on another level, I paid attention.
Yeah.
I was more interested in what was happening down there.
Yep.
I think it's a conversation starter more than maybe a vote changer.
They mold
but
the
it's
conversation.
over time.
They're not necessarily going to change the vote, but they might get you to pay attention.
I certainly agree, and there's no greater proof of that than Bruce Springsteen and Chris Christie, who is the greatest Bruce Springsteen fan
That's
to
right.
ever ignore every Bruce Springsteen lyric, and he ain't no old fogey. The guy rocks like a motherfucker.
I was.
We want to know what y'all think. Please comment below and write angry stuff too if you need to do that.